This is very difficult for me because I normally talk with people. I don't do a whole lot of talking to people. So they asked me just to talk about myself for about 45 minutes, which shouldn't be hard for me to do, but it actually, it's not what I do on a regular basis, but we'll try to get through it. So, as Tori said, I'm with the Atlanta Police Department. I've been with them since 2007. Prior to that, I'll give you a little bit of my history as far as work and how I ended up here. Prior to that, I spent about 7.5 years with the Department of Juvenile Justice. I was an administrator at a youth detention facility there. So I've been post-certified as a law enforcement officer since 2000. I'm also a post-certified instructor. I do a lot of teaching at the police academy. I teach an LGBT diversity class that I wrote the lesson plan for about 2 weeks after I took this position. So I spent a lot of time doing that. Prior to that, I was in retail and restaurant management, so I was always dealing with people, just not in a law enforcement capacity. So I'll start a little bit about, as Tori said, I am openly gay. I've been openly gay in the police department since I started. Came out in the academy, actually, at the police department. That was interesting. I'll tell y'all the story. I know y'all are waiting with bated breath. So. But I'll start back, I guess, with my coming out story, because that's what we normally tell here at PFLAG. My partner Daniel and I have been coming almost a year. So part of my coming out story, I came from a small town. When I was born, my parents lived in Alabama, just across the border, in like Cedar Bluff, Alabama. But they drove up to the good hospitals in Georgia so I could be born at Floyd Medical Center. So I was actually born in Rome and pretty much raised in that area. My parents moved to that area when I was about 2nd or 3rd grade, so Georgia's pretty much all I know as far as living here. So we moved into that area, and although Rome has grown some, anybody know where Rome is? My mom and my sister still live there, so they have 2 Walmarts now, so I think they're about to get a Publix. My mom's really excited about that. They don't really know what Whole Foods is yet, but we're working towards that. But we lived in that area, and going to high school and going through in the country was kind of difficult because I always knew I was gay, as far back as I can remember. So I went through that in high school, and I dated a lot of girls. I didn't really know why at the time I was dating girls, because I kind of knew I liked guys. But when I was 16 or so, I was dating the quarterback of the football team. And of course nobody knew that but us. And he continued to date girls, which I didn't like. So I broke it off. Well, he shows up at my house that Saturday morning crying. And my mom comes downstairs and she says, "Jack's upstairs and he's crying about something." I said, "Oh no, the cat's about to be out of the bag." So I go upstairs and deal with that, and my mom says, "Is there something we need to talk about?" And I said, "Yeah, how about we go to lunch?" So we went to Applebee's, which is the place to eat in Rome. And on her 3rd golden margarita of the day, I told my mom that I was gay. So that was how I chose to break the news to her. She dealt with it okay. I was actually shocked because I had always wanted to tell her, and we had a very good relationship, but I was always afraid to, obviously. But I kind of had to then, because she's a pretty smart lady, so she had pretty much figured me out at that point. But as I've shared here, she went through her stages. She was just a lot quicker. I've heard people like Babs and some of the other parents talk about how they still go through some of the stages that my mom was able to get to in 2 or 3 weeks. So I was very, very fortunate in that. The initial shock for her was, "What about all those girls?" And I said, being the smart aleck that I am, I said, "Well, they all had cute brothers." That didn't go over too well with her, bless her heart. She was not there yet. I was there, but she was not at that point. So that was probably not the best thing I could have said in retrospect. But But once we got past that, she went through her stages of, I think for the next week, I don't think she spoke to me. Might have had something to do with that comment now that I think about it. But she had a difficult time. That was her time of mourning, I guess, for her to process what I had said, because for 16 years she thought that I was going to grow up and get a white picket fence and have a wife and 2 kids. And I kind of did away with that in 3 words for her. But once she got past that initial week of, I'm not going to speak to you, then it was, I think the next stage was probably the denial. It's just a phase. You know, you've not been gay, you're not gay now, you just think you are. It's just a phase that you're going through. And once you get it out of your system, we won't have to worry about it anymore. Well, that lasted for a few days, and then she moved on to, oh no, what did I do? It's my fault that you're gay. I must have been a bad parent. Your dad wasn't. My mom and dad divorced when I was fairly young, so your dad wasn't there. I coddled you too much. It's got to be my fault, right? I said, Mom, it's not your fault. I was born this way. And I think once she got to that point, you know, where she didn't have anywhere else to go. She went through the mourning. She didn't think it was her fault. She kind of figured out it wasn't going to be a phase. Where do we go from here? I just sat her down one day. It had been about 2 or 3 weeks after I told her, and I just said, Mom, you know, everybody in my family at the time, my stepfather was great. He was completely supportive. I wasn't his kid, so it's a lot easier, I guess. It's always easier when it's somebody else, right? But he was fine with it. I had a younger stepbrother who was 14 at the time. He was great. He was curious, wanting to know, you know, what, you know, asking questions. And I had a stepsister who was 15, and she was great. The only person that had any issues with it was my mom. So I sat her down and I said, you know, what's different about me today than 3 weeks ago when I told you that I was gay? And when I asked her that question, she stopped and she thought, because she'd never really pondered that question before. And I said, you know, I'm the same son that you've had for 16 years. Nothing's changed except for I said, I am gay. And she kind of looked at me like, and I don't know what it was about that statement, but she had an epiphany at that moment, and she just broke down and she said, you know what, you're right. And that was the end of her struggles with my sexuality. Thank God. Because I've heard some horror stories, especially coming to PFLAG, so I am extremely fortunate to have her support. I have a younger sister who's 10 years younger than me, who's very supportive as well. But that was my coming out story. I was one of the lucky ones. My mom was very supportive and wonderful through the process, and still is to this day. We try to get up and see her as much as possible because she enjoys spending time with us. So. But as far as most people want to know how I ended up in this position, like I said, when I worked my mom was one of those people that you always had to have a job. The minute that I turned 15, I got a worker's permit, and I got in the car and we drove to every place within driving distance for me to get a job. So I went to work in my first job was McDonald's. So I was used to the retail and restaurant business. And when I was, I guess, 17 or so, 16, 17, I got a job during the summer making biscuits at a convenience store above our house. I'd go in at 3 o'clock in the morning and make biscuits for all the people who went hunting in the area. So I did that through the summer, and when I got out of high school, I went to work, and they actually let me run a cash register when I turned 18. You had to be 18 to sell beer, or I can't remember what the law was, but I started running a cash register, and within about 3 months, they made me general manager of the store. So I'm making like 30 grand a year at 18. You can't tell me anything. I'm driving a BMW. Life is good. College was not on my mind. Being a police officer was not on my mind. Those were not things that I was considering. But I did retail and restaurant management for a while. And back in late 99 or 2000, a friend of mine was teaching school. He was a math teacher, and he was teaching at a local regional youth detention center. And they have juvenile correctional officers, because those kids are not there for whistling in a humming zone. So they need people to keep them there where they're supposed to be. So, and he said, you know, I've always had an interest in law enforcement. It's like just been a hobby, Andy Griffith Show, things like that growing up. So he said, I think you'd make a great JCO, juvenile correctional officer. So I said, okay, I'll go check it out. And I went in, got a tour of the facility. The administrators liked me. I got the job. I left my job. I was a general manager of a restaurant, and I was making probably 60 grand a year at that point. And I took a job making $9.61 an hour. Yeah. I had put myself in a decent position enough to be able to do that financially, and that was going to be my dream. I was going to go to work there. I was going to work for a year or so, and then I was going to be a police officer. I'd made up my mind. As I was like 30 at that point, 31, you know. So I went in, did the job for a few months, and I got promoted fairly quickly. I made sergeant, lieutenant, captain, chief of security, and then I moved up into administration, and I spent like 7.5 years there. But that was getting a little old. I mean, when you do the same thing every day, you're locked up for 8 hours a day. When you're an administrator, it's more like 10 or 12 hours a day because you're always there. So I knew I wasn't getting any younger, and I wanted to go to work for the police department. So I'm openly gay, so usually police work is pretty hegemonic. It's very, you know, cliquish, and I'd known that because I knew a lot of police officers. So when I'm looking around in the metro area, I applied at a couple of different places, but Atlanta was where I wanted to be because they have domestic partnership benefits. They have an LGBT liaison. They had one at the time. And if I was going to police, I wanted to hopefully get a job here and be an Atlanta police officer. They have very good training. They do paramilitary training with their academy, and that was something I was very interested in. So I came in and applied, and the other 3 agencies that I applied for all called me like 2 or 3 days after I accepted the position with Atlanta. So I started as a police recruit in February of 2007, and our academy is 6 months. It's pretty intensive training, so I went into the police academy and became a police recruit at, how old was that, 31, 32 at the time. I was one of the older people in my class, and went through the academy, and I've always been openly gay. I'm not one to, you know, skip in with a rainbow flag and wave it and tell everybody I'm gay, but if you ask me that question, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to be honest with you. So nobody really ever asked me that question in the academy until family night rolled around, and it's where you get towards the end of the academy and you can bring your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, whatever your significant other is, and they come into family night. Well, when family night comes in, all the guys are bringing their girlfriends, and all the guys are bringing their wives, and all the girls are bringing their husbands. I walk in with my partner and his mom and dad, and instantly became the talk of the town in the police academy. Everybody was like, and you know, as far as discrimination, I didn't really experience that. I knew there was a few people in the class that had an issue with it. I mean, it was pretty obvious. Nobody overtly called me names or said anything bad or, you know, whatever. Not like you would, or at least what I would have expected. But there was a few people that obviously they didn't talk to me for the remainder of the police academy. I said, okay, I guess that's to be expected. And 3 of the people in my class came out to me after that. They were like, well, you know, we're gay too. I was like, yeah. I was like, whew, well, I'm not going to be the only one. At least I know there's 3 more, right? But one